Story 1. Last night, I was included in a group email where a manager demanded that we add documents to a job. I emailed them back privately to say, I don't think we require that for this job. He emailed me back, copying everyone else, admonishing me for not knowing it was required and saying I should know not to question him. Multiple other people joined in, agreeing with him and criticizing me. 20 minutes later, another email appeared from the manager. The documents are not required for this job. No apology included. Story 2. I was leading a development team programming the user interface for a set-top box for an old-school pre-Netflix streaming service in Japan. Another company had been contracted to do the mobile phone interface for the same service. About 6 months in and less than 2 months from final delivery, the client's boss was replaced, and the new boss decided that he didn't like what the client had given final approval for heading towards delivery. So they demanded we completely start over from scratch and redo everything according to a schedule they would dictate. I said no and got into a big fight with the client. But I didn't back down, and it was too close to delivery to replace us. Even my developers, who were all Japanese, wanted to give in because the customer is God. But I stuck to my stance. Instead, I told the client what and how we were going to give the customer what they wanted, but entirely on our own terms and schedule. The client was upset but had no other choice than to agree to our terms. Delivery rolls around, and we delivered exactly what was ordered, completely on time, and 99.99% bug-free with no crunch or overtime. All my developers went home at night. Meanwhile, the mobile contractor had apparently swallowed the client's demands without argument, only to fail miserably, and their delivery was a complete bug-ridden show with schedule and cost overruns. In the end, the client actually apologized for arguing with me and thanked me for not backing down. That was probably the greatest vindication I've ever experienced. Story 3. I was working for a company and mentioned that their decisions with a project and their recent explosive expansion, having tripled the employee count in a couple of years, would end up with them having to lay off half the staff the moment this next project comes out because it was going to fail and everyone was pretending it wasn't. I got paid off and left the company. They did layoffs after the project was released. Management, of course, got generous severance packages. Story 4. I had a motorbike as a teenager and was the only one of my friends who had one. I once told them that if you wanted to turn left on a motorbike at speed, you needed to steer to the right because that's what causes the motorbike to lean to the left, known as countersteering. I found it was a pretty interesting thing and had wanted to talk to them about it. My friends then proceeded to make fun of me and call me dumb for believing that and kept doing so for a few years, while simultaneously refusing to look it up. Of course, when a few of them started riding motorbikes themselves a couple of years later, they just quietly accepted that countersteering is a thing. They then also massively downplayed that they'd ever made fun of me for claiming it was and said I was overreacting. In retrospect, I realized it was actually common behavior for them that if I had experience in something they didn't, they'd just ignore my opinion. It even went so far that despite me studying mechanical engineering at university, they'd always assume another guy in our circle of friends was right and I was wrong when we discussed anything related to that field because he'd gotten a few good grades in mathematics once in high school. Safe to say that now, a decade later, they're not my friends anymore, and I feel much better off for it. Some people just need to knock others down to make themselves feel better. Story 5. In elementary school, at age 10, I got into a very heated verbal fight with my whole class about Lucky Luke shooting faster than his own shadow. Some kid talked about it. I remarked that technically everybody shoots faster than their own shadow, even if the difference is so small it can't be seen. According to the class, I was an idiot because everybody knows that light is instant. However, we also learned that when the sun goes poof, it would take 8 minutes to see it a couple of weeks earlier. Lucky Luke's shadow is a consequence of him standing in front of it. I even went to the blackboard and drew the sun and earth with light depicted as droplets like a shower. And when you turn off the shower, the droplets that are already falling don't magically disappear. They keep falling. So, logically, when Luke creates his shadow by moving his arms, it takes a little while to be seen in his shadow. This just didn't compute with the rest of the class. The teacher was just sitting in her chair, enjoying the debate. But she stepped in when everybody was declaring me a lunatic, and I was getting frustrated that nobody could agree on something so obvious. I was no young Sheldon and did a lot of age-appropriate stupid stuff, but I still feel the frustration of the whole class egging me like a bunch of cavemen. Story 6. The finance director at the company I worked for sent a company-wide email warning people that if you got mugged at a cash machine, you should put in your personal identification number backwards to secretly call the police. Basically, chain letter junk. Being young and foolish, I replied to all to explain why this was dangerous nonsense. The finance director replied back to basically say, yes, it is true. My manager emailed me privately to say that I shouldn't contradict the higher-ups in public. Story 7. I was a volunteer operations staff member at a comic and anime convention. During a break, I dropped in on one of the industry panels that was doing a free raffle. I hadn't bothered changing my staff shirt because I still liked helping convention goers and other staff as I walked the halls. The company representatives had no qualms about giving me a ticket when I walked through the door. Turns out, I ended up winning one of the low-tier prizes. As I gleefully started walking up front to get my prize, someone shouted, "Hey, no fair. He works here." And the entire room of about 100 people started booing me. I snapped back, "Hey, I work for the convention, not this company. I am helping run this entire convention for free." The entire room went silent. I happily collected my prize and walked back to my seat. The funny part was, I wasn't even interested in the prize. I don't even remember what it was. Story 8. Once I was on a game show on a cruise. It was a big one on a big stage, and everyone was watching because it was promoted all week. It was in the style of Family Feud. The question was, what is people's biggest fear? I know that at a funeral, people would statistically rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy, so I said public speaking. I was instantly booed off stage, and my team replaced me. I walked away embarrassed from being laughed at by a few thousand people, as I heard the ding of the number 1 answer. I just went back to my room. Story 9. My cousin's girlfriend cheated on him, and they broke up. I told him to never go back because she would just do it again. They get back together and immediately decide to have a child. She cheats again. They break up again. I tell him the same thing. Now they're back together again. He says he's just pretending so he can get laid and not have to pay child support. I call nonsense. I'm not picking up his pieces and putting him back together again when she inevitably breaks his heart again. Story 10. Someone tried to tell me that Islam was the world's oldest religion. When I told them that Hinduism was the oldest, they got upset and called me a racist. Edit. Wow, this comment got more popular than I expected. Hope you all stay safe and have a great day. Story 11. 10th grade. The teacher tried to tell me Thomas Edison discovered electricity. I said no, it was Benjamin Franklin with the key and kite. We argued for 10 minutes or so, and the class backed her up. Eventually, I was sent to the library to do research. She wasn't happy with my findings. Story 12. I had an ongoing argument with human resources. I kept telling them the guy supposed to do the shift after mine was showing up late, not performing the work, leaving issues for others instead of handling them, stealing time, and so on. I was essentially told they didn't care, and if I kept bringing it up, they would fire me. In other words, why are you threatening to fire me for being annoying to you when I'm right about the person actually breaking the rules? Story 13. We were talking about something with a coworker. I happened to mention how we humans are animals. She started laughing at me and making monkey noises and gestures, insisting that we are not animals. I had to ask another coworker to confirm my statement, and she finally stopped. I was 22, and the unwise coworker was in her 50s. As we say in French, she was dumb as a broom. Story 14. Pretty much every time I'm on a gaming subreddit talking about what I would like to see in later updates to the game, I cannot count how many times I've made a reasonable suggestion and gotten 5 different people going into detail about why I'm wrong. They argue that it would never work and makes no sense or is completely pointless. Then, a year or so later, there's an update to the game, and it demonstrates pretty much exactly what I was talking about. I'm usually fairly restrained and resist the urge to go back to those conversations and poke the bear. Story 15. A long time ago, I had 2 friends over and showed them Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and they both said it wasn't funny. They looked at each other and then at me and said, "Yeah, dude, it's not funny." That's fine if they really thought that, but they both looked at each other like, there's two of us and one of you, so we must be right. Story 16. Everyone in class was cold. I, excited about a fact I had learned the week before, said that if we turned the ceiling fans clockwise, we could warm up. The girl next to me started laughing and said, "That's not how fans work, sweetie," and most people laughed with her. No idea if the fan trick would have heated the whole classroom, but clockwise ceiling fans absolutely circulate warm air. Story 17. I was nervous about Trump winning in 2016. People I knew who considered themselves political experts and who studied political science laughed in my face and basically called me stupid. Story 18. Once here on Reddit, the talk was about birth and labor, and I corrected some people who were discussing how it's inherently painful and dangerous, spreading fear and misinformation about it, and claiming that cesarean sections are better. Cesarean sections are not better, and labor shouldn't be inherently painful. It has some pain, but it shouldn't be an excruciating and traumatic experience. What makes it painful and traumatic is obstetric violence, which unfortunately still happens often. Consider the position they put women in, which everyone thinks is the only position to give birth because movies and television make it seem that way. Research shows that not only is this a more painful position to give birth, but it also increases the chance of complications and delays the labor process. I was downvoted to oblivion on that post. I am a women's health specialist. Story 19. Pretty much any liberal take here in the southern United States, even if it's a provable fact. Climate change is real and caused by human activity. The meat industry is terrible for the environment and unjustifiably cruel. Fetuses aren't babies, and no, you can't walk into a clinic and get an abortion at 9 months pregnant. Anywhere. We don't want to ban guns in Texas, we want universal background checks. There are currently no private sale laws in Texas. The gun show loophole, as it's called, allows you to privately sell guns to anyone without a background check. The only stipulation is that if you knew they'd use it for a crime, you could be held legally responsible, which means practically nothing. It's very irresponsible. You're not poor because of immigrants and taxes. You're poor because rich people are hoarding wealth, wages are stagnant, corporate greed is raising prices for no reason, and tax breaks for the rich. Yeah, those tax breaks won't be for you, Mr. $30,000 a year. Being gay isn't a choice or moral failing. Evolution. America isn't a Christian nation, and the Founding Fathers didn't use the Ten Commandments as the basis for the Constitution. Jesus is disappointed in you, and John would call y'all a pit of vipers. Story 20. There is a huge problem with poor communications in all of science and technology development and research. The reason is simple. The science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education vertical has no professional communications classes at all. None. Add the fact that science and technology people tend to be introverts, and you get entire industries that cannot communicate, constantly confuse one another, and generate unnecessary stress for everyone. Try pointing out how all this stress and confusion is caused by basic poor communications, and they will argue to their death that it is something else they can't articulate, but it's not poor communications, no way. Story 21. When I tell my wife I don't remember something, I'm on 3 medications, all of which cause memory problems and have epilepsy. If it wasn't for password managers, I'd reset 100 passwords a day. Story 22. In early 2020, I told people I thought COVID-19 might be an actual issue, and they argued with me that it was another media circus about nothing, and I was naive for believing them. Story 23. I got roasted in high school health class for saying that a major difference between teenagers and adults is that teenagers do not have fully developed brains. Zero backup from my teacher. I am still bitter. Story 24. There are a ton of them on Reddit. I will post a comment with information I am qualified to comment on, as it is related to my degree, certifications, or what I do for a living, and I will have idiots downvoting me as if what I am saying is not a verifiable fact. Story 25. 4 years ago, I repeatedly said that Biden needed to be a single-term president because his age would be an issue. I also had major reservations about Harris being someone who could use the vice presidency as a springboard to become president. I got downvoted. In the spring of 2023, I still thought it was a bad idea before Trump officially announced for Biden to run again and that we needed a primary. More downvotes. Then this summer, when Biden performed poorly at the debate, dropped out, and without any input from voters, they appointed Harris, I said I understood the urgency required and hoped for the best. But I did say that we had better get an actual primary in 2028, that Harris's only real shot was that she wasn't Trump. Yet more down votes. I don't think it was that many Democrats didn't want to vote for a black woman for president. They just didn't want to vote for that black woman. At least she won't run in 2028, that's a given. Hoping that Gavin Newsom does run. If it's Pete Buttigieg, we're in trouble. And yes, I voted for her and would vote for Pete too, but I'd be delusional if I thought America is ready for a gay president.